Every year, the global cement industry collects roughly $400 billion from your economy. Every year, the concrete you paid for starts cracking within decades, sometimes within years. And every year, at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, Roman harbor walls poured over 2,000 years ago sit in corrosive salt water getting measurably stronger. Not surviving, strengthening. That is not an engineering curiosity. That is the signature of a financial crime committed in broad daylight across 2 centuries. Here is what they needed you to never calculate. The Roman recipe called for 3 inputs: volcanic ash, quicklime, and seawater. No kiln, no fossil fuel, no temperature anywhere near the 1400 degrees Fahrenheit that modern Portland cement demands. The ocean supplied one ingredient for free. Volcanic deposits supplied another. The energy cost was essentially zero. You cannot build a recurring revenue model on materials that wash onto coastlines without human effort. You cannot lock contractors into supply chains when the formula requires no factory, no patent, no proprietary process. So in 1824, when a British bricklayer named Joseph Aspdin patented a cement that required burning limestone in industrial kilns at temperatures hot enough to melt aluminum, the industry did not adopt his product because it outperformed the Roman version. It adopted his product because it could be owned. Think about that with the cold logic of an accountant. A material that degrades over decades creates perpetual demand. A material that strengthens over centuries kills your customer pipeline. The Romans wrote their formula down. It was never lost. It was made irrelevant by standardization, building codes drafted around kiln-fired cement, engineering curricula that never mentioned the older chemistry, and supply chains structured so completely around one product that alternatives became invisible. Not illegal, just absent from every catalog, every trade school textbook, every contractor's muscle memory. The ocean has been manufacturing structural stone since before human civilization. Beach rock forms at room temperature when calcium carbonate-saturated seawater precipitates minerals directly into sand, fusing loose grains into solid mass without a single calorie of applied heat. Ancient peoples at Tel Yarmouth quarried it. Phoenicians built harbor walls from it. The Romans watched the sea do this work and reverse-engineered the chemistry into the most durable construction material in recorded history. Then someone with a patent in a kiln decided durability was bad for business. What you were taught in every construction course, every engineering program, every home improvement aisle is not neutral knowledge. It is the residue of a market decision made 200 years ago, one that replaced a free, self-healing material with an expensive, self-destructing one and called it progress. The question is not whether Roman concrete works. The ocean proved that long before any laboratory confirmed it. The question is what else sits buried under the same logic, and how much of what you call common knowledge is just someone else's revenue model dressed up as physics. So let's run the numbers, because this is where the industry's entire business model either holds up or collapses under its own arithmetic. A team from the University of California, Berkeley, drilled core samples from Roman harbor sites in 2013 and confirmed something the construction economy would rather you never calculate for yourself. Roman marine concrete, submerged in open ocean for 2,000 years, is measurably stronger today than when it was first packed into wooden forms. Not preserved, actively gaining structural density decade after decade, century after century, because seawater percolating through the material grows a crystal called a luminous tobermorite at 20 degrees Celsius, room temperature, no kiln, no external energy input whatsoever. That crystal normally requires extreme geological heat and pressure to form. The Romans were producing it with a bucket of volcanic ash, quicklime burned at roughly 2/3 the temperature Portland cement demands, and salt water pulled straight from the harbor. 1 part lime, 2 parts pozzolana, seawater. That ratio was recorded by Vitruvius and sat in readable Latin for 20 centuries before a laboratory proved it was not poetry but a precise engineering specification. Now hold that against the product that replaced it. Modern Portland cement concrete exposed to the same seawater deteriorates within decades. Salt infiltrates, corrodes the internal steel reinforcement, and the structure begins failing on a timeline so predictable that the industry has built an entire replacement economy around it. Every marine pier, every breakwater, every coastal retaining wall poured with Portland cement carries a built-in expiration date, and that expiration date is not a flaw in the business model. It is the business model. You do not generate $400 billion a year selling something that never needs replacing. You generate it by engineering a product that forces the world to repurchase on a 40 to 60-year cycle, while a 2,000-year-old alternative literally feeds on the very substance that destroys your product. An ancient account from 79 BC described this concrete as becoming a single stone mass impregnable to the waves, growing stronger every day. That line sat in historical text, dismissed as Roman exaggeration, till Berkeley's core samples proved it was physically, chemically, literally accurate. The seawater was never a contaminant. It was the active ingredient driving continuous mineral growth inside the structure for millennia. And in 1824, when an English bricklayer named Joseph Aspdin patented a formula that required burning limestone at temperatures hot enough to melt aluminum, the construction world did not upgrade. It downgraded permanently into a product you have to keep buying because it keeps dying in the one environment the Roman version was specifically designed to thrive in. Every contractor on Earth is locked into a supply chain they never chose. That is not an accident of history. That is an ownership structure functioning exactly as designed. The global cement market extracts roughly $410 billion annually from a workforce trained since trade school to specify one product, certified by codes written around one product, and supplied by relationships that route back to one product. The asset here is not calcium powder. The asset is captivity. Think about what Portland cement actually accomplished when it displaced every competing cementitious technology within a century. It did not win on longevity. Roman harbor walls, submerged for 2,000 years, are still gaining compressive strength, while Portland structures crack within decades. It did not win on environmental cost. Producing 1 ton of this powder releases approximately 1 ton of CO2 into the atmosphere, because the process is literally burning carbon out of rock. The industry pushed 1.6 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide into the sky in 2022 alone. It won on one criterion that has nothing to do with engineering and everything to do with extraction. It could be owned. You cannot patent volcanic ash. You cannot patent seawater. You cannot patent a lime formula documented since 25 BC. Any builder alive today could reproduce Roman concrete tomorrow with materials from an agricultural supply store in a bucket carried to the nearest coastline. The intellectual property value of that recipe is zero. And zero intellectual property means zero recurring revenue, zero licensing fees, zero captive downstream market. That is the real engineering problem the industry solved. Not how to make better concrete, how to make concrete that requires you to keep buying from them. This is the wealth logic nobody explains at orientation. When a material demands centralized kilns, heated to 1450 degrees Celsius, capital-intensive facilities, and ongoing raw material supply chains, it creates a permanent toll booth between the person who builds and the corporation that manufactures. Every pour is a transaction. Every transaction is a tithe, flowing upward to shareholders who own the kiln, the patent, the supply route. The builder owns his labor. He does not own the means of making what his labor requires. So when researchers publish findings on Roman seawater concrete, the objections arrive on schedule. The minerals take decades to fully develop. Early compressive strength is lower. Volcanic ash is regionally limited. Each objection is technically accurate. None of them explains why a 2,000-year-old technology with zero fuel cost and increasing durability has been sitting untouched in published literature, while an industry burning limestone for profit emits more carbon than global aviation. The answer is not complexity. The answer is that free materials cannot sustain a $400 billion extraction apparatus. And what the chemistry actually does at the molecular level reveals exactly why that apparatus needed you to never learn this in the first place. So here's what you actually do. Not a philosophy, not a manifesto. A recipe that fits on the back of a receipt and costs less than lunch. You walk into a garden center or agricultural supply outlet and you buy 2 things. Hydrated lime, sometimes labeled agricultural lime, and pozzolanic volcanic ash, sold as a soil amendment or a blended cement additive under half a dozen brand names depending on your region. Both are shelf products. Both are legal. Both are cheap. Neither requires a contractor's license, a permit, or a relationship with a ready-mix dispatcher who marks up every cubic yard by 40% before the truck even leaves the yard. You bring them home. You mix 1 part quicklime to 2 parts pozzolanic ash, dry in a bucket. Then you add seawater, not fresh water. If you do not live near a coast, you dissolve roughly 35 grams of sea salt per liter of tap water. That is a kitchen scale in a jug. You add the salt water gradually, working the powder into a thick mortar consistency, the way your hands already know if you have ever mixed grout or patching compound. Initial set begins within hours. Workable early strength arrives within days. That is the entire procedure. No 1400-degree furnace, no fossil fuel bill, no supply chain phone call where someone puts you on hold for 40 minutes and then quotes you a delivery window measured in weeks. Now, the critical distinction. This is not a replacement for every structural pour on a job site. Nobody's telling you to frame a high-rise with a bucket of volcanic ash, but for non-structural applications, garden walls, raised beds, outdoor paving, decorative blocks, small landscape structures, this mortar performs comparably to Portland-based mixes in the early weeks. And then it does something Portland cannot do. It keeps getting stronger. Left exposed to moisture, especially periodic saltwater contact, the calcium silicate hydrate inside reacts with dissolved magnesium and bicarbonate ions to crystallize tobermorite and phillipsite directly inside the microstructure. Those minerals interlock like natural fiber reinforcement at the crystal scale, blocking crack propagation, stiffening the matrix continuously over time. The material is not decaying, it is mineralizing. A garden wall built with this mix a decade from now will be harder than the day you poured it. The action is small, deliberately small. 1 bag of ash, 1 bag of lime, 1 bucket of salt water, 1 non-structural project in your yard this weekend. That is how you sever the first thread connecting your labor to a supply chain that was designed to keep you purchasing rather than producing. You do not need to overthrow an industry. You need to pour 1 wall that nobody else shipped to you, and then watch what time does to it. Because what time does to Roman marine concrete is the opposite of what time does to everything the Portland industry sells. And that difference, compounding silently in your backyard over months and years, teaches your hands something no invoice ever will. Nothing described in the last 20 minutes obligates you to do a single thing. That sentence matters more than every dollar figure I just quoted. Walk away right now, forget the ash, forget the seawater, forget the lime, and your life continues exactly as it was. The cement aisle at the hardware store still exists. The $40 bag of Portland still works. Nobody is going to knock on your door and tell you that you failed some test of awareness. This is not a membership. There is no second video you have to buy. No course with a checkout page, no community with a monthly fee attached to the back end. The formula is public. It has been public since Vitruvius wrote it down in Latin before the birth of Christ. Your exit door never closes. But here's what changes if you stay. 1 50-pound bag of pozzolan. $15 at an agricultural supplier. 1 50-pound bag of hydrated lime. $10. A kilogram of bulk salt. $3. Enough to mix 30 liters of synthetic seawater. Total outlay for your first cubic foot of Roman mortar sits between $3 and $5 in raw materials. The same volume in Portland runs 6 to 10. Your survival buffer is not a philosophy. It is the fact that your first experiment costs less than a fast food lunch, and if it fails, you lost an afternoon and a few dollars of at dust. That is the entire downside. No contractor's license revoked, no mortgage on the line, no reputation staked. You mix some powder in a bucket in your backyard and either it calcium silicate hydrated into something harder than what your neighbor's driveway is made of, or it did not, and you learned why. Your next move is small enough to fit on a receipt. 1 bag, 1 bucket, 1 afternoon. The chemistry does not care whether you believe in it